What's happening, all you beautiful humans who've decided to tune in to this podcast episode today? Welcome, guys, to the LifeXpanded podcast. I don't usually do video intros, but I was feeling inspired with this one. Quickly, before we delve into the episode, today's guest, Mr. Jeffrey Munks, wrote an incredible book, The Fractal Spirit, Awaken The Avatar Body. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend. What an incredible guest, guys. Very, very interesting, knowledgeable, fascinating wizard. He's a larger than life personality. He's an extremely talented artist, performer, pianist, author, and deep thinker. So we went deep in this episode. We dissected a bit of the concepts in the book, and we just had a cool conversation. So it was epic, guys. Make sure to get his book on Amazon, or if you are in the Cape Town area, go to Exclusive Books at the V&A Waterfront. You can get a copy there, and you can also find Jeffrey's music online as well. I'll have links in the description so you can find it there, but he's on Spotify. He's everywhere you can find him. Just search for Jeffrey Munks and you can find the magic that this man has put out into the world. Before we delve in, guys, our new online store, the expanded product section. I'm so excited. We've got a new website. It is lifeexpanded.co.za. Complete new revamped online store so you can get your products. Make sure to get Expanded Brain and Expanded Youth. Guys, if you're worried about your health, then just get some Expanded Youth. Not going to go into depth now about what's in here, but it's phenomenal. Go have a look online. Also, Expanded Brain. I don't do a podcast without it, guys. I don't do any highly engaging workload without Expanded Brain. Or even if I want to go for a run or a good surf and get in the zone, you want to get that complete cognitive enhancing effect without the kind of crashing effects of caffeine, then nootropics is literally the way forward. So check it out. Also, all our microdosing products you can buy online as well. Get it delivered to your door today, guys. But yeah, without further ado, let's delve into this episode. We've got a little piece of music from Jeffrey right now, and then we're going to go straight into the conversation. So please give me your feedback, guys. I'd love to hear what you think. And make sure to like and subscribe and leave a review if you're feeling called to on the podcast. That would be great. Otherwise, peace, guys. Mr. Jeffrey Munks, it's good to have you on the podcast, brother. Welcome.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, it's an absolute pleasure. It never ceases to amaze me, the synchronicities and the magic of the people that flow into my life, just like at the right time. And when I'd met you 10 days ago, literally,
10 days ago. I
just finished up a podcast, and I always have this moments where I'm like, where am I going to come across another interesting individual who I can have a conversation with? And the universe is always just like, well, here we go.
There you go. Manifest it, here it happens.
Yeah, we go. And it's been amazing. So I literally met you 10 days ago. You ended up coming over to my house that same day.
I did.
Rocking an incredible performance on the piano. And I found out you had a book that you had just published. After chatting to you, I had to grab the book and read it, which I have done. And I finished it yesterday, just in time for this conversation. So thank you for putting that book out there, because it was honestly a phenomenal read.
Thank you.
And so much I want to delve into today. I feel like every page of your book I could dissect, and I've got so many earmarks on there because it's just pages of like, okay, I want to come back to that.
Perfect.
Incredible. Myself personally, I grew up obsessed with Harry Potter. I was one of those kids who would read, reread, and I was obsessed with these magical fantasy worlds. And I really felt like it was a catalyst for me into my later psychedelic plant medicine experiences and kind of that general thirst for this, like, what is this all about? The mystery of life, this, all these spiritual teachings, and trying to figure it out, And what I loved about your book is you were able to create this complete fantasy, fictional, magical world, but at the same time infuse that with literally, I feel like, all the teachings I've come across over the last years and the direct experiences I've had with plant medicines and deeper understandings that only you can kind of get to, that own gnosis, that knowing. So you managed to put it all together in like one book with just like everything in it, and I really enjoyed it. So
thank you. It's incredible. Like that's the intention of writing the book, was exactly for that. I only started writing the book in July. Okay. So I wrote the book in 5 months, 4 hours every day. Okay. That was the intention. And the intention set out was to create something like a sort of manual, in a way that if I can, these thoughts and ideas and concepts in my head, if I could condense them out of the mind, out of the imagination, and find a form of matter that then I can transfer it to someone, and then they can read it and unfold in their mind, and then they can continue with the experience and understand it. I mean, thank you, like, to get the feedback that it actually worked, or that it happened, and that it is.
Yes. No, it really was. And I would love to find out a bit about what was the kind of inspiration to write the book, and how did you manage to articulate something that I feel like is, I don't believe everybody has to experience a psychedelic experience, but you were able to almost take that experience and put it into words, but those experiences are by their very nature pretty ineffable.
Yes.
But you were able to really paint this vivid picture that you could almost take somebody through a trip or a journey in the book, somebody who's never experienced maybe potentially some of those realizations. What was that process leading up to your idea to write the book like? What was the backstory to that?
So this is my second book that I've published. My first book I published in April, and it took me about 25 years of my life understanding to get the book, or to write the book. And I thought to myself it would take like another 25 years to write another book. And so what ended up happening was, as soon as I published my first book, I thought, that's it. Another 25 years until I write my second book. But about a month later, I had an experience where I dived into 7 grams of plant mushrooms, and it was a deep dive. Yeah. It was the most I've ever consumed, and was also the deepest experience I've had on 7 grams. And towards the end of the experience, let me actually share with you.
Yes, please do.
Let me share with you what happened.
Share the experience, because I remember that was one of the conversations I initially had with you when I just met you, and I was like, God damn it, that's an interesting experience.
So to share the experience, I had met an individual, and my emotions intoxicated. I mean, it was the first time that I had in myself believed that I've fallen in love. Okay. And this emotion that has taken over my entire body and self. And so this individual, she has never consumed mushrooms and was curious. And so I was actually planning on heading back to the ships. I had a contract booked, and about a few days before I was flying to Miami for 6 months on ship, she came over. I created a whole space. So how I did that was I cooked chili sin carne, like a full vegan meal beforehand, so it would sit in the pot for 10 hours, so we'd have something to eat afterwards. I put up flowers everywhere, roses. I did fairy lights. I had a fireplace. I had ambient music. I love creating moments.
Proper setting.
The whole experience. I was not planning on the 7 grams. Initially, it was supposedly 2 grams. That was the initial intention, being a first time, being the experience. So we started off with this, and she comes over. We have the 2 grams of mushrooms. For her first time, it didn't last as long. It was very much like in, experience, and come back out. So it lasted within an hour and a half, which was very surprising. So then what we did was I grabbed a little bit more mushrooms into the setting, and then we consumed that, kind of peaked up, and then we started diving deeper down the rabbit hole. And I was like, you know what, we need music. We need music designed or created for this experience. And so I put on Led Zeppelin. I mean, like, I had to. And listening to Led Zeppelin, it was one of the greatest experiences. The musical layers, the Stairway to Heaven song, the Whole Lot of Love. I mean, that song blew my mind. And so we were going through this experience, and then she asked if I had chocolates. I was like, yeah, I got chocolates. So I got up, I ran towards the fridge, and as I tried to grab it, I missed the handle, and I fell backwards, and the whole world collided in like fractal kaleidoscopes. And one of the best moments of my life. And then I got up, I grabbed the fridge, and as I grabbed the chocolates, next to it was the rest of the mushrooms. And I'm like, So I grabbed the mushrooms, grabbed the chocolates, I put them into a bowl, I mix it all up. And then I walked back. I also had tea, so it was a little tea party. And so I brought back, and now we're dived into the 60s and 70s. Like, we're sharing mushrooms and chocolates. And we lose track of time. We lost track of the consumption. We lost track of everything. I mean, we just started diving deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until everything was just there. And because there was an intention of the experience of flowing, we weren't really diving into our own minds. It was very much the connection, the conversations, the experience. It was her first time, so it was like, what's this, what's that? Like this whole curiosity, the conversational flow of explaining and then experiencing. And then it got to a point where everything started becoming overwhelming. I've entered these the realms before. The breathing I can process and understand, but for someone that's never been, it was very overwhelming. To a point where she started breathing intensely. So because we were so entangled, I was able to understand and feel everything she was going through, and vice versa. And so everything was starting to breathe. I mean, everything is breath. Everything is moves, the vibrations. The room itself was just this inhale and exhale, this cave of experience. And then all of a sudden she realized that she's no longer in control of breathing. The world, the universe is breathing for her. And so she tries to breathe quicker to try to get in control of her own breath. And by doing that, she starts to like hyperventilate, trying to get back in control. And then, so I'm like, okay, I need to slow everything down. First thing I do is I switch with the Led Zeppelin. I mean, that was an intense experience. Yeah. So I put on some very beautiful ambient music. And then I opened up the window, got some fresh air to come through again. Just try to like move some of the chaos bits and pieces. And she looks at me and she's like, Jeffrey, can you calm down, please? So I start laughing in my head. I'm like, I'm not the one having a moment. Like I'm trying to calm the situation down. But something in my mind clicked. And it was, for me, a very profound moment. Is in the moment of calming the situation down, in her perspective, how medicine works, everything's in waves. Everything goes ups and downs, especially with emotions. You're just the experiencer of them. So they come, you experience them, and then they let go. And especially in the medicine, they come and go very quickly and very long, depending on how long you hold on to them. Yeah. So by me having to try and calm the situation down, in her eyes or in her experience, there's something wrong. And I'm feeding that her experience. And so when she told me to calm down, something clicked, and it was as if the last lifetime of my life here, of all my experiences with my Reiki, my previous deep dives, my travels, my conversations, my teachings, my Reiki, my meditations, breath work, somehow all of that just collided into my mind, and I knew exactly what to do. And so I knew I put her on the couch, just lying down, relaxed. I know she's not going to die. She's just going to go through it, and we will come out the other side. So for myself, what I ended up doing was I sat down on the floor, took a deep breath in, closed my eyes, and I began to meditate. And as I closed my eyes and I went inside, I was transversing through this grid-like structure, like kaleidoscopes, texturized grid patterns and colors. I was just pouring through. And this individual, she was entangled all over. And this was my own emotional attachment. So because I'm now with this love, this abundance that I have towards this individual, I had attached myself onto her. So I started slowly picking her through my brain and started returning her back to her. Not because I wanted her out of me or out of my mind and out of my emotions, but I wanted her to have her. I wanted her to have all of herself so she could work, process, and go through what she's going through. And at the same time, surrendering that so that I can come back to myself. Because I felt like the last 2 months I couldn't find myself anymore. And so then I was returning. It was like fine surgery within the self. It was a very interesting experience. And as soon as I returned the last little bit to her, there was this opening, this eye, this white angelic experience. And all of a sudden the words and the terms came to me and it was like, welcome home. And that was the experience that I got. And in that moment I was in awe, speechless. The moments, the breath, the life, the death, the love. And I closed my eyes, I lied down. I've been to this space before. It's been a return. It's a returning. It's a remembering and becoming a member of yourself again. And as I lied down, something different happened for the first time. So out of the many years of self-seeking, self-searching, self-finding, self-losing, and the whole game.
Cycle, yeah.
This whole cycle, the dance.
Yep.
I came to a new point, which I've never experienced before, whereby I opened my eyes while I was lying on the floor, so I was looking at the ceiling, and I did this. If you watch the movie Avatar, with the blue man, you know that moment when he gets into the avatar body, and he does this with his hands. Yeah. So that same experience is what I did. As I did this, the distorted fields of reality, like ripple tides in space, I did this with my hands. I looked around, and all of a sudden, the self, the I, the Jeffrey, the identity that I have created for myself in this life ceased to exist. In that moment, there was no attachment, not to anything, nor even my own identity. It was as if the creator or the coder or the designer or the architect was peeking through his own creation, looking at life before him, before the grandness, and was looking at its own coding. I could see through my own skin. I could see the vessels, the bone structures, but it wasn't flesh. It was liquid density. It was like a liquid gas, but with a slight density of colors, and it was all very rippling. So everything had a slight ripple to it. And as you move through time and space, all of a sudden you distort the realities, the ripples. And so I started looking at my skin, tattoos. I started looking at the air beyond, but my eyes were so open. And in my life, I have never felt so sober. I can't explain, but it was clarity, the clarity of life. And in that same moment, I heard the words, I am in awe. I completely forgot she was even here. I looked to my left, and she's sitting on the couch, and she's doing the same thing. She's looking at her hands. And she's like, I am in awe. And she looks at me, and I look at her. And all of a sudden, it's not I and her. It's God and God. It's creator, it's universe. It's like the one hand with two puppets on the fingers looking at each other, but knowing that it's the hand, knowing that it's the whole body then. And so then it was very quiet and just very...
like the ultimate realization in that moment, which is like, it's hard to articulate because it can almost bend the concept that the mind would like to try and put to it.
Exactly.
Because to have that kind of realizational moments is...
It's speechless. It's wordless.
It is wordless.
It's a moment. It's like climbing to the top of a mountain and seeing the first thing you do is you don't take a picture. You don't write a song. You don't paint it. You don't speak about it. In that moment that you climb to the top of the mountain and you see that view, you're speechless. You're like... But that moment, that's the moment.
I mean, it's like you said in your book, I think there was a passage where you wrote something about to the effect of, words is not where it's at. The only way to experience life is to express it, like through
the feelings,
art or
the experience of it.
Yes, to experience it.
And then everything we do is the expression of life.
Yeah.
So whether it be art, whether it be music, whether it be science, mathematics, the coding, anything we do, the movement, making food, everything is the artistic expression of the self and the mind. And this is all of us trying to explain life. So when you look at life out there, all the man-made creational experience, is the universe through our own selves expressing self. And this is now the human aspect, but now when you look at nature, it's the exact same thing. Nature is the expression of life. And so that moment was a speechless moment for me. And while I was there in those moments, I asked. Actually, I didn't ask yet, but I looked at my cells, and this is where the idea for the book came. It was actually in this state. It was actually as this breakthrough moment happened. I did ask, like in my mind, I was like, I would love to write another book. Or I wanted to not write a book, but how could I condense this experience into a package or into a gift, whereby then without needing the consumption of mushrooms or medicinal medicine or of any external substance, I can grant someone that gift, and as they unravel it in their own mind, they will have the experience. That was the intention. That was the understanding I had. But I was like, how am I going to do that? How does anyone do that? And so then I looked at I constantly kept looking at my hands. Like in the book, he always looks at his hands. So I was constantly looking at my hands. And all of a sudden I saw a little version of myself running along the skin. And he was going to the fingertips, going to the shoulders, to the feet, to the hair, to everything. And he was pondering the universe. Who am I? He was pondering the shape of the universe and realizing that the universe he's running on is himself. So he looks then at his cells and sees a mini version of himself running along his whole body, the Fractal Spirit concept. And then when you look into the stars or in the night skies, you see these galaxies, which are the eyes, so your own eyes looking down at you, self-observation, self-seeing, self-being. And so that was the concept of Fractal Spirit. But I'm like, now how do I write a book or a story around that little concept? And how do I make it that it's transferable, that would make sense, that would have an impact, whereby the reader could just pull out or draw something or absorb an aspect of it, even if it's just one word or one sentence or an idea. And you don't remember anything else of the book, but if one little seed is planted, then the book has done what the book's needed to do. And so that was the whole experience. And then after that, I asked her quickly, what clicked? Because, conversations is always sharing past experiences, trying to find a familiarity, a similarity, and acknowledgement of self to dive into the conversational flow. And so I asked her, what clicked? What made you from this, this stressful control or kind of, the hyperventilating, the breathing, the chaos of self? I asked what clicked, and she said it was after she told me to calm down, when I sat down to meditate, the minute I was able to calm myself. And then that had so much more profound implications.
And you realize everybody else is just mirroring you, essentially, at the deepest levels.
Exactly, because that is me.
Yes.
It's the same thing. So that was all the realizations that pondered into that moment. And so I would never have been able to achieve that state hadn't I had the connection with her, and vice versa. So I do believe that entire experience of 2-3 months that I was with this individual was designed to allow ourselves to return, experience, and gift, and then continue. So that night when we ended up falling asleep on the couch, all I remember was the tuning out. So it takes a lot to get there. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of going through the shadows, going through the self-doubt, the egos. It's just the demons, the self-doubt, the fears, the everything. To get through that, you break through and you have that
peak experience.
That peak experience. But then you still got to come back down. It's the waves. You're not going to be there forever. Because if you're always there, if everything's beautiful, how do you know it's beautiful?
Exactly.
So it's going to come back down. But it's not a come down where it's like, it's a come down as if you hike the mountain. It's a satisfactory kind of release. It's like you're walking down a mountain after you've hiked it. You're ready to go back down. You're ready to recharge. You're ready to ground. You're ready to get back. So that transition out of that experience, I remember was very loud. I remember it was very loud. Now, from the silence that I was experiencing to the loudness, there was ringing. There was an intense ringing. So I was lying on the couch and the ringing got louder and louder and louder. And all of a sudden it just like switched off. And then I just remember waking up the next morning. And ironically, it feels like it's never left.
Wow.
And so every day since then, I do my meditations, I do my breath work. In previous experiences, when I entered that state, I asked, how can I achieve it without the substance? And it was breath work.
Yeah.
So that's when I started doing in-depth breath work. And a couple of days later, I flew onto the ships. I was in quarantine for 2 weeks in 4 walls by myself. So it was very interesting, but I loved it because now I got to sit with myself and ponder these thoughts on how am I going to put this all into a book. And 2 weeks after that, I got my new laptop from Amazon that arrived on ship. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start. And I just started writing. And I wrote the whole book in 3 weeks. The initial story.
Yeah.
I just brought myself to the writing and I just started writing. Whatever came to me. It could be, I don't know, I just put myself in the desert and I just started writing what I was seeing. I was just trying to articulate and verbalize and describe what it is that I was seeing. So I just wrote. And for the 3 weeks of writing, I never reread what I wrote. I just kept writing. Just even if it was nonsense or anything, I'd just keep writing and writing and writing. And sometimes I'd have these, oh my God, that's perfect. Okay, let's do that. And sometimes it's like, this doesn't make sense, but anyways, I'm just going to continue. And only after the 3 weeks when the initial story was done did I go back to the beginning. And then when I wrote it for a second time on the laptop, I literally rewrote about 90% of the whole book. But the storyline was there, the concept was there. And now I could see it clearer and clearer. And every time that I went over the book, I read my book like 100 times, from beginning to end. And every time I went over it, I kept adding on, fine-tuning it, detailing it, structuring it. I did the whole formatting myself, so it was very personal experience to honor that moment into this experience. And after 5 months of editing, formatting, building, researching, trying to find the right adjectives, trying to find the right descriptions, trying to learn grammar, if you were to read my first draft, it wouldn't make sense. But this is now the art of writing, which I've recently discovered, is how can you articulate or words, structure sentences, structure words, paragraphs, chapters, a book, so that if you give it to anyone, the words will then unravel the mind of the reader. And certain colors will produce certain emotional experiences in the mind. Certain words will trigger certain emotional responses. And certain scenarios will be reflective or something you can connect with. And so that was in the art of writing. And it's so surreal.
Yeah. Man, it must be surreal to see what you've created in that form. Wow, man, there's so much I'd love to touch on from that. But you mentioned like the remembering, and I feel like in these peak experiences, there's a sense of, wow, I've been here before. Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned in the book, and was something to the effect of one of the greatest gifts of the universe is that we forget when we come into this life. Because, I mean, let's be real, if we understood everything and we had all the answers, there would be no experience to be had. So coming into this reality, we forget. Yes. And then you had quite a great way of articulating the concept, potentially, of trying to put the concept of the universe God into a description that was of the candy store.
The cosmic candy shop.
The cosmic candy store. I don't know if you want to share that, because I thought that was beautiful.
So the cosmic candy shop theory was an idea I had years ago, actually. It was an idea... So imagine the entire universe as the candy shop. And it's mostly the candy shop because of the treats and sweets, because life is treats and sweets. As kids, we always look forward to that. As a kid, you walk into a candy shop, it's like, oh my God. So I wanted to use just the analogy of a candy shop. So in the candy shop, everything's made out of candy. The floor, the walls, the candy itself, the lights, everything. But not just that, but the air itself is maybe like a dust of sugar. Is like, so everything is candy. Everything is the candy shop. And now the candy shop being there wants to know, what is the candy shop? Because how does oneness know that it's one if there's no two to understand what the oneness is, the duality? So if everything's the candy shop then decides, as this grand intelligent candy shop, I'm going to create a me within myself so that I can now experience what I've created. So now the candy shop creates this little avatar body out of candy, molds it out of the candy, and then with the breath, breathes life into it. Breath of life. I mean, like, this analogy has gone back for like thousands of years in so many scriptures, but this is just another analogy of it. And so now this candy avatar, this candy man, he's walking around this candy shop and he's looking around and he's like, But that quick amnesia thing is the ability for that candy shop to alter its own consciousness, to alter its own mind, to forget that it is. I mean, that must be the greatest.
Yes.
That blows my mind. What grand intelligence out there altered its own consciousness to be able to forget so that it could seek self. I mean, the art of that, the coding of it, it's a brilliant concept. It's like, you build this candy. Let me just finish with the candy shop before I dive further out. But now this candy man's running around. He sees all of the candy, and then eventually he pondering life but never knows, and then eventually dies, and that consciousness returns back to the candy shop, and the candy shop self is like, that was fun. But wouldn't it be cool if now I can make that little candy man realize that he's the whole candy shop, but I don't want to tell him the answers. I don't want to give that candy avatar everything. So let me plant like little secrets, like little treats, hidden treats within the candy shop. So breathe life into the next being. So now the next being's running around and he sees all these little candy treats, but all of a sudden there's like a candy treat saying, I see you. I see you, what does that mean? There's another candy that looks like an eye. Why is it looking at me? There's a little running around, there's like images of the galaxies that look like the eyes. So all these little treats are started panning out, all these little dots. And before he realizes that he's the candy shop, he dies again and returns. So now the candy shop is like, let me create maybe multiple of them, and then let me allow them to co-create, so that this dance, the goal, the experience can continue without me having to constantly pull in and pour out. So it could be a fractal experience. So let me create two candy beings that when connected, they can produce more candy beings. And so then each one of those can continue the experience of seeking self and seeking me, seeking the I. And so then eventually one of the candy people decides, okay, if it's not out there, let me close my eyes and go inwards. Realizing that he himself is made out of candy, seeing that everything there is candy, and connecting the dots, then having these experiences. Eventually the candy shop puts certain candies that when consumed will peek through the keyhole. So when you consume that little candy, all of a sudden, it activates the avatar of the candy man himself, and he realizes, oh my God, I am the candy shop, and all of this experience. And then he comes out of it, and he's like, that was an experience. And then, but how do I get back there? Or why this? And then the whole pondering experience of the waves in and out, kind of this amnesia ability. I just used the analogy of the candy shop, but
There's so many different articulations of that same concept, and one that comes to mind is Alan Watts, and I love he's one of the closest people. His concepts is the closest I've found what you've come through in the book.
Yes,
and there's not many people who can get to that level of that understanding. And Alan Watts, he has this idea that it's like the dream. We're in this dream. You could create any dream you want to create. So you can create, and you'll create all these amazing things, but eventually you'll want to get lost in the dream to get further and further into the dream. And it's, that description of planting seeds or clues in the game of life to have the experience, I find to be so true, because the more you start to pay attention to the subtle nuances around you, the signs are everywhere. The path,
it's all screaming in your face.
Always.
Life, I mean, listen to the wind, listen to the fire, listen to a thunderstorm, the lightning, the crack, the bolts. It's all screaming in your face. This is me. This is life.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. I mean,
and we all miss it. We run around chasing our tails, and nobody wants to face another topic that I enjoyed that you really honed in on was death, and this idea that the Stoics kind of have this memento mori, and it's
memento mori. Remember, you will die.
We're all gonna die, and not many people want to actually talk about that.
Taboo.
But once you realize it's just a transition, once you die, and I've had a few death experiences in mainly plant medicines, but when you realize it's just a transitional thing, then you can really live. That idea of pondering death and what does it mean when we die, it's like it's
it is like if you sit there and you ponder death, everyone will die. That is a fact. I mean, death in the sense that this physical experience now will end. The consciousness, the self, the awareness will awaken again, will come home. The experience. This is the game. We are playing the game.
The game of life.
The game of life.
I had an interesting download when I was actually on Iboga, and it showed me how everything is a game. Everything is from separation of the one. It had to play a game to start knowing itself. And this is what this illusion of separation has then ultimately become. It's this idea that we are just a microcosm of the macrocosm, and it keeps
the fractal.
The fractal. I mean, that's the
closest. Fractal spirit.
Yeah. And it's quite mind bending, that idea. When you zoom out of anything, it's like it mirrors everything else. It's just it's quite a mind bending.
Exactly, and that's what got me fascinated actually in black holes as well. The theory of them. It's like when gravity becomes so heavy on planets, they actually cave in because in their particles themselves or atoms, they say is like 99.9999 empty space. Now we know it's vibrational wavelengths, but in that concept, now when two atoms come together, they will forever collide towards each other, and they pull time space within. And then black holes kind of infinitely go in. They will never create that singularity or that singular point. They will forever infinitely go into each other, and that creates that experience. Because if it was to create the singularity, it would become then the oneness of everything.
Continuously.
Exactly. And then that oneness will be there, and we'll be like, okay, now what? So now it has to spiral out and create duality again. The experience, that's the concept of what then I believe when the universe expands, eventually it will stop, eventually then it will contract again, and has the cycle. Yeah.
Have you heard of any of Matthias Stefano's work? He has shown Gaia called Initiation. He was actually on Obi Marcus's podcast recently, and he's a really interesting guy who's can remember all of his past incarnations of different like planets and densities and dimensions, and he has this theory of like the 9-dimensional reality and how it kind of it's like one big loop, and how it kind of mirrors all the things that you talk about, even with the geometry in the back of the book, and how you're explaining the awareness and how it moves and it creates another point of awareness, and it just the geometric articulation of the universe makes sense. It really does. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was the theme of because numbers is also the sacred geometry is really powerful. The number 12 seems to be quite a big theme in the book. I mean 12 is everywhere, from the 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 hours in a half a day, 12 months, and it can go on and on. This concept of 12 and sacred
sacred
numbers and geometry,
sacred numbers.
Where did that come in for you, and where does that all tie in?
So 12, so 12, it stuck with me for a long time, thinking now 1 and 2 is the duality. So if you want to keep it very simple very quickly, it's 1 and 2. 2 is giving 1 a definition. 2 gives 1 meaning. 1 would not be without the 2. But then also 12, you have 12 main chakra points. I know it's 7, but there's 12 sitting around, but there's actually a hell of a lot more. And then 12 also, playing piano, you have 7 white keys and you have 5 black keys, so there's 12 keys in an octave as well.
It's interesting, the works of people like Graham Hancock, and then you look into ancient civilizations, and they've left the signs.
Everything works with
everything
geometry.
Works with the geometry and the numbers and the patterns and even the stars and the constellations, and it's like these clues for the universe are everywhere.
Exactly. I mean, Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, it fractal. I mean,
exactly.
It's fractal. It's geometry, because they always say 1 + 1 = 2. That's fact. It is the way that it is. It will never change. So then doesn't math then become the language of then the universe? It's the coding. It's the coding program on which then the universe is then founded on.
The great algorithm. Another thing that you wrote in your book, which I found for myself, I also kind of wrestled with this concept, and it's like it's a paradox between like nothing matters because we're all going to die, and in the bigger scheme of it, like none of it matters.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this moment right here is what matters. This is
Exactly.
it. So trying to find that
The balance.
and then realizing what I realized, because like I was on this journey of seeking. Okay, finding this, trying to figure out this, and then it's eventually like we're never going to ultimately know, but the mystery is what drives us forward. So how do you reconcile that in your day-to-day life with like everything matters but nothing matters? So what does matter? Like what?
Giving meaning, finding meaning, finding a purpose. I mean, if you don't, like the people that live the longest, they have purpose to live. So for me personally, it's creating. It's like how, in what other ways could I could just say or one word. I could compose one song and say this is it. I could write one book and say this is everything in the book. But now when it's there, it's like it's created, it's out there. But now I have a desire, like how can I deconstruct that same concept and construct it, build a puzzle in a completely different way again, and then come to the same conclusion, which is then the love, which is the I, which is the am, which is the universe. And for me, every time I waves, I still dip. I mean, we all do. We go through the highest highs, and I find the higher the highs we experience, the lower the lows become, to give the ability to have that contrast of experience. And so when I do hit the low lows for myself, I know then I'm hitting a low. I will read a book. I'll listen to some music. I will ride that wave. I know it will come out. It's not the end. I'm not infinitely going to go down. Eventually it hits a rock bottom, because eventually it wants to experience something else. But then this is now self-identifying self again. That's, you are then separating yourself from then the oneness of everything. And so then you realize, wait, this is all just me. This is all just in my head. And when you start questioning those kind of things again within self, you start spiraling yourself back out of it. And you start coming back to yourself again. And then you start riding that wave back up again. And then you have the new curiosities to want to create some new stuff, compose new songs, write a new book, paint a new artwork, open up a new job, converse with a new person. You spiral up. And then you like climb the mountain, you get to the peak again, you're like, oh, I'm back. And then you experience it, and then you're absorbing the moments, because that moment's not going to last. But you absorb it, you're aware of it and conscious of it, so you embrace it even more. And then it starts to dip down again. And it gets crazy. It is, because if that then becomes every day and the awareness is always there, it becomes overwhelming. And I personally, it does get overwhelming.
It does.
So what I try to do is meditation. I mean,
coming back to the breath.
You slow yourself down. Even in the low lows, even in the high highs, you breathe, you come back to yourself, and you float. I mean, it's in the state of euphoria. When you get back to that state of just where you can just breathe, you're literally floating through self. It's colors and patterns. I'm grateful to have synesthesia, so seeing colors through sound.
Yes, you did mention that.
So especially, so breath is also sound. I can hear it. So when I close my eyes and I do my breathwork meditations, I focus then on the senses of the experience. So I focus then on the sound of breath. I focus then on the texture, because there's texture behind the air that you're breathing. There's the flavor of it. There's the lightness or the thickness. So you immersing yourself in that moment. And then when you get to that moment, you begin to float. And because of the sound, I see the colors of breath. That's very interesting, because when I'm playing music, I see colors within chords and majors. So your major chords, so like your major chords are more of your warmer colors, your orange and your reds. The minor chords are very much blues, cold greens, cold purples. But it's not just through music itself, it's the sound of wind. Wind has a very translucent blue color. Crackles, like fire crackles.
Yeah.
Ironically, that is the same color. It's like this warm, reddish, crimson, scarlet kind of texture. It's as if the universe knows what the color is and then manifested the matter out of it to give the experience of it. Like, that's why the sound of fire is red, because it's like the fire itself. And if you ever sprinkle like blue or different salts on fire and they change the color of the fire, it seems a little unnatural, but then all of a sudden the fire itself feels different.
Yes.
And then the color feels different. And then the sensation and the experience is different.
Just quickly going back to what you're talking about, the waves, and I'm so glad you shared that, because I definitely feel like I needed to hear that. But I have ever had quite a crazy year and so much change in so many good, beautiful ways in my life. And also having these big experiences where I've been riding this high wave, and like synchronicities, messages, everything's flowing, everything's just beautiful. And like life's just amazing. The abundance. And then it gets a bit too good. And then all of a sudden I found myself like for about 2-3 weeks, like really out of the flow, just not flowing. You know, when you just feel like you're out of the zone.
It feels stuck.
Yes. And you can't just get your mojo. Nothing's working. You start doubting yourself. Like, have I made the right decisions? You kind of go into this mental rut. And then it's a wave that kind of rides up and down, and I think it's a good practice I was reading recently, and being able to, you know, when the highs and the lows happen, being able to kind of dissociate from it, even when it's something really good, because if you can practice that kind of non-attachment, obviously be attached to it, but not allow it to sway you either way. You can kind of be the witness in the experiences of it all. But creating is one thing that I found to be, and that was one of my main, I had a conversation with my higher self in one of my experiences, and it was showing me, you are part of the creator, you're here to create, so create.
Yes.
And it's like that simple. It was like create.
Exactly.
And I was like, and then when you realize you can literally create anything, it's like, well, that's where the magic is. And that's why it's even like things like doing a podcast or doing some editing or doing some kind of creative work. I find myself just like feeling in it. And I feel like coming back to creating whatever expression that comes through for you is such a good way to...
So it's always like when you physically creating, that's the magic. The product is just the kind of the byproduct of the experience.
Yeah.
So when you're playing music, when I'm playing, I close my eyes and I feel. You feel it. And you experience. When the songs finish, I'm like, why did I have to finish the song? It's like I could have just continued. When you're doing a podcast, that's why I love conversations. The point of the conversation is the conversation itself.
Yeah.
And this is actually the fundamental of my first book, is I wanted to base it around not just the importance, but the understanding of conversing with people. It doesn't matter what really the topic is about. It's more of the energetic exchange, the intention behind what is being shared. Neither one has to be right or wrong, but that creates in the flow, like the questions, the answers, the curiosities. And 95 majority of the time, conversations are normally sharing experiences. So then it's life literally seeking self again, self, questioning, so how was your adventure? It was good. I did this, did that. And then they're kind of sharing their experiences to try and understand and seek meaning again. But that interaction, I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
Because I can sit by myself, I can close my eyes, one can go into self, because we've always got that voice in our head. Everyone's got that voice in their head that's always there. That's ironically not you. You are the awareness of that voice, because you can hear it. That voice is not you. It's you are what's observing the voice. The voice then becomes the curiosity. Curiosity, the word of the day. So when we're conversing with someone, we're sharing, and then that becomes the game. That becomes the flow, the dance, the interaction.
Yeah.
Because when speaking, it's coming out. It's like, I see you. You see me.
I am you.
I am you and you are me.
Yeah.
And yet we somehow still find a basis to communicate. And this is why a lot of people then will find different topics. They want to master different topics so that they'll have the opportunity when they converse with new people to have different ways to communicate, seeking that acknowledgement and yet seeking the game itself.
Yeah, it's being the infinite player in the game of life. And there's a brilliant book, Finite and Infinite Games by James Carse. And the whole premise is it's like this beautiful book that's it's really, really powerful. But the whole premise is like, you can either play the game to try and win the game, which is a lot of what we do in society. We're trying to win.
Yeah.
Or
Try
you can
and draw that energy, gain that energy, be better.
Or you can play to continue playing.
Exactly.
It's like, let's continue the flow, because that's where the magic is. It's in the process of.
And that was a sideline purpose of myself for writing the book. I wanted to create future experiences for myself, and I wanted to create an opportunity for, in the future, if I meet strangers that have read the book, all of a sudden there's a whole topic deep dive that we can dive, because conversations, we eventually just we want to unravel each other's minds. We're curious.
Yeah. What's
in that mind of yours? How do you see life? How is it that it's your experience? And so, but when you meet strangers, you can't just, very few times you can just start with these deep conversations, because everyone comes to you with their own personality, their personal reality, their own borders, their barriers, their protection circle, so that they don't get drained. So they'll always be like a little bit hesitant. There's always a little bit of hesitancy when you're conversing with strangers for the first time. It's like, who's this person? How am I going to communicate, converse with? So if I could find a way to break down those barriers in the get-go, or not break them down, but bring the curiosity, because curiosity opens up those barriers. Because now you're curious, you want to absorb new information, new seeking new treats and adventures. And so I thought, if I can write a book where I can put the concepts that I love into the book and then share it with someone, and if they connect with the book, then all of a sudden there's a deep conversation we can spiral down. And the whole point of that conversation is then coming back to the moment, self, source, and the game itself. And so it still blows my mind that the book is out there, that it's done. But then it will also, if two other people read the book and they meet each other, all of a sudden it's a topic conversational starter for them. And the topics within the book are these questions that we question and ponder in our own minds, too scared to open up to other people sometimes, in fear of being judged, or in fear of being judged from someone else.
Conversation is, like, I found myself definitely over the last few years being drawn towards more wanting to have real deeper conversations that kind of push the right buttons and just get you really thinking and articulating yourself in different ways. And so I really battle nowadays with that kind of that surface level conversation. And it's like,
so how's the weather today? Yeah, it was good. I call them muggle conversations.
That's so true, man. Another theme in the book which I really enjoyed, and it kind of came full circle, and you kind of really did take somebody on the kind of typical Joseph Campbell zero journey. And in that, kind of facing the darkness which is chasing you, which you think is something external to you, but then realizing that actually is you and your fears and shames and guilt, and transcending through that. Because when you go through your own shadow, which a lot of us don't even want to acknowledge is there, that's where I found the most magic to be, is going into the shadow.
Exactly. Why is the shadow there in the first place?
Who
put it there? You put it there yourself. I've recently been understanding that the shadow is it gives direction, and it's part of you. It is. It's something that it's not to be feared, because it is you, first of all. But it's a part of you that you suppress, and by doing that, it seeks to be experienced. And so by wanting to be experienced, the self, it will start gnawing on you. It will start like tweaking in the mind. It will start like planting all these seeds, like, oh, maybe you need to do this or do that, or you're not good enough, trying to draw you back down so that you can have that experience.
Keeps you playing small.
Exactly. And so when, as you said, like working through the shadow or going through that, you can actually find more of self, more of, it's a release, it's a surrendering.
It is.
It's so in the book itself, it was only once he was running away from the shadow the whole time, which majority or nearly everyone does. We don't want to confront it. I mean, like, I don't want to, no one does. But it keeps redirecting you. Like in the book, every time the shadow comes, it redirected him. So he was always on one path, or he was about to do something here, but the shadow always redirected him to where his self actually is. And eventually, whether you stop yourself and work through it, it will eventually catch up to you, and will like, now you got to deal with it. And this is why it towards the end actually consumed him. Like it actually stopped him, and it's like, I am here, it's time. So he now goes into that whole darkness experience. And it was only after he confronted that and was able to come out of that experience, then what did the deeper universal insights happen, which was now the with the sacred geometry, the blueprints, the coding design of the universe itself. And then eventually, only after that realization and understanding and embodying, did he awaken in his avatar body.
Yeah.
Because it was only once he found all of self,
Yeah.
the yin, the yang, the light, the dark.
You can't spiritually bypass. And
No,
get
you
to
can't.
that
You
without-
can't bypass that shadow and awaken into yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, ironically, when I was writing the book, I didn't know that this was going to happen. When I did that whole, towards the end, the whole shadow self kind of experience, that kind of wrote itself. And so as soon as I wrote it, I was like, oh, I created a plot twist. Oh my God, this is so cool.
Wow.
So not going to lie, majority of the book wrote itself.
Amazing.
I literally just brought myself to the space and allowed this to come through and write what needed to be written. So as if the book was always there. And now with time then, because it's all now, because the past doesn't exist nor the future, and it's all now,
Yes.
all books, all ideas, every concept's already out there.
Yeah.
It's all swimming in this matrix pool,
Yes.
this quantum field. And so when we can tune into it, or tune into ourselves, into this infinite pool of everything,
Yeah.
then we can kind of, it's actually not us pulling it through, it's actually seeking a vessel for itself to be expressed or experienced. So if I want to now write a book, it's not my thoughts, it's this seeking the vessel and kind of then using me as a body to experience the writing and pouring out the book itself.
Yeah.
When I'm playing the music, it's not my music. The music's already there.
So it's coming through you.
It's seeking a body or a vessel that has honed in the talent or the craft of being able to express itself, and then it pours through. So as the vessels, as the avatar body that we all are, if we want to do something, inspiration will find you when you're doing it. It's like you can't write a book if you're not writing a book.
Yeah.
You can't play piano if you're not playing the piano.
Yeah, and on the deepest level, time doesn't exist. Everything is only happening in the now. And then it's like, I had a recent experience with 5-MeO DMT, and it almost felt like it almost broke my mind, because I feel like I experienced everything, and right now it became everything, everyone, everything, every timeline. It all exists.
Yes.
And it's just like right here now.
Exactly. And then it's just like this explosion, and you're like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
How?
Yes.
Why? And you start pondering all of things, but by the time you're already questioning, you've already lost that experience.
Exactly. As soon as your mind starts to try and put it together,
Exactly.
you've lost it.
Exactly.
It's the frustrating thing about
Exactly. That's why I still go back to this whole amnesia thing as well. It's like it blows my mind.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. Quickly on the shadow, I wanted to just touch on something that I think, and that's why I speak about plant medicines and these various different ways that you can experience the divine and the ineffable. But I think a lot of people are actually hesitant to have these experiences because they're afraid of the shadow.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was figuring out life when I'm my younger 20s. And I thought I had it all figured out until I had my first kind of heroic dose mushroom experience, which really pushed me into confronting my shadow. And then like going deep into that like own personal hell was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but it was the most liberating, beautiful,
to come out of
healing. Yeah, to like shed the weight of these judgments we place on ourselves.
It's you yourself knowing that I can do this.
Yes.
I've gone through this. I have the capability of going through that.
And any bad shit that's happened to you, that's created a trauma or created a bad pattern or whatever it is, that isn't you. No. That complete realization that at the core of our essence, we are all just perfect divine intelligence. We aren't bad people. So these shadow aspects is like, once you realize that, it's like, okay, so now I've got none of that on my anymore. I can really just live life. And I feel like if more people can confront their shadow, it's the most rewarding thing.
No, I mean the plant medicine magic mushrooms, they have changed my life.
Yeah, likewise.
They have. When I was 19, it was my first experience down the rabbit hole. I actually, in my first experience, became the white rabbit. that was the physical sensation of my experience. I was the white rabbit. Wow. But up until then, I started doing Reiki when I was 15. I experienced Reiki for the first time. 16, I did my Reiki 1. 18, my Reiki 2. I started reading. My first books was Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. Read those when I was 17. Those were my first books I ever read. And so then I started reading like Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra. I started reading all of those books, and I always felt like I was floating after I read those books. Like it just made sense. There was just comfort in the knowingness. And it wasn't until my first experience on mushrooms when it clicked, when it didn't become a knowingness anymore, but it became the sensation, or it didn't become the knowledge anymore. It became the knowingness, and that knowingness became the physical embodiment of the experience. Like every cell in your body just explodes with this realization, and it changed everything for me. And
that's the dream. I mean, you can read for years and you can study all these different philosophies and ideas and like you said, Eckhart Tolle, I read his book and it resonates, but it's like it's still not tangible.
It's not. It's And then it wasn't until 2 years later, when I was 21, when I was on another mushroom trip and in the jungle, and I ended up meditating for the first time. I closed my eyes. Something in me said, just go within. Because if you don't go within, you'll always go without.
Yeah.
And so I closed my eyes and I went within. And for the first time, that moment at 21, it was at Origin Festival. And ironically, Origin was my origin. It's just perfect. And all of a sudden, like, that was my first death experience. That was my first time I left my own self. Every part of my self-identity dissipated and became nothing. Because no thing that is not which everything is. And so in that moment, all I was a flicker. I was like a flicker of light. This is a little white gold particle, but it was pulsating very slowly left and right of vibrational ether. And as it started pulsating, it started creating patterns like mandalas. But as that started growing and rippling out, it created like a heart, a source of expression. That heart started creating the lungs, the bone structures, the whole, and then eventually I was floating naked through space. But I had these ripples. But I was both the observer and the experiencer. So I was both seeing myself, and yet I was the individual ripples and expressions going outwards. I kept going outwards, and eventually, once my whole body was formed, it started creating the earth around me. So I started seeing the floor ripple, like with geometry and waves. The grass started melodically flowing. Eventually hit the trees, and the trees were fractalizing and rippling up to the branches, to the leaves, and out into air. And the whole space around me was moving. I mean, to a point where it's like you throw a rock or pebble into space and it stops right here. And then everything just like starts rippling out of that. But it's happening everywhere. So everything is just this constant motion. But then the awareness started spreading even further out to the clouds, to the sky, above the sky, eventually the whole earth, eventually beyond the earth as the self, to the moon, to Mars, to the sun, which was this drawing energy of light. Beyond that, eventually created the galaxies out, further out into space, started creating like all the cluster systems in the universe, and then everything started connecting again, even further out, started creating like singular particles again, to creating like atoms, the DNA helix and everything going further out, until I came out of myself again. And then from that infinite oneness, I came out of my heart and I became myself again. It was just this fractalizing spiral of self, like this constant experience. And it was just, it was no words.
Yeah.
And that entire experience happened in one breath. As soon as I closed my eyes and I exhaled, releasing everything, I literally melted. I felt like I was decomposing into the earth. And as soon as I took that deep inhale, that was when that entire experience happened. And at the peak of my breath was the realization. And as I exhaled, when I was releasing all of that. So that entire realization of the oneness in the universe in one breath, because that one breath was the moment. And that blew my mind. I mean, that also just showed me how powerful breath is, how powerful a moment is. And the minute one has that moment in life, everything changes. And it just takes that one moment.
Yeah.
It means
it's yeah.
And I still meditated for another 3 hours thereafter. Sure. I mean, like, you know how many times you breathed in 3 hours, and every breath was a new realization, or not new realization, but a realization, returning.
Yeah.
It was a remembering. It was becoming a member of myself again, and every breath was. I mean, that singular moment when the person that sat down and the person that stood up, two different people. I mean,
It's a life-changing experience.
That was a life-changing, and it was only after I sat and meditated on the plant medicine, on the mushrooms, with that moment changed everything. And one of the second realizations on the second breath was, what do I want to do with all of this? I mean, that's ultimately what we then come to. It's with this realization, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
It's like, how do we can now sit in the jungle and meditate for the rest of our lives, and I'll be abundant. Yeah. I'll have everything I need. I understand these yogis and these people in the mountains that meditate in caves. Like, I understand. The Buddhist monks that sit in the temples, the religious people that pray all the time, anyone that just honors self and source, I understand. But I'm like, I'm 21. I've still got a whole life ahead of me.
Yeah.
What is it that I want to do? And I realized my favorite aspect of life up until that moment was conversing with people, sharing this knowledge, sharing the understanding, sharing to allow another person to awaken into themselves. I mean, that is an incredible gift to have.
No, that's beautiful, bro. And I think, to be able to share that and potentially stoke the awakening within somebody else. I mean,
plant the seeds there.
Yeah, because that's all we can do is plant seeds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to
them themselves. We can't do the awakening for them. We can't feel for them, but we can facilitate. We can.
Yeah.
This is why they say, like, the shamanic shamans and all the medicinal teachers and practitioners, when someone's sick and they come to you, you don't physically do anything. You just give them the space, and then they would do the healing themselves. This is Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural. Yeah. That book blew my mind.
That was one of the also pivotal books that kind of shifted me a few years ago when I read it, and I was the way he's able to articulate the merging of science and spirituality.
The placebo effect of the mind itself. I mean, I read that book as soon as I finished my first book, and I drew a lot of inspiration and articulations from that book for the second book.
I can see that. Yeah, I like that.
So the breathing techniques that came from Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, his meditations with that kind of tightening of the mulaband all the way up, and it's a really powerful thing. And going back to breath, it's one of the very few practices that I've implemented daily, or most days. In the morning I do a 20-minute of breathing, and breath is life. It's like if you can get a good breath work practice in, it resets completely any stress, anxiety, scatteredness, kind of centers you and just allows you to go through your day like, okay, I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the amazing thing is you got it all the time. It's accessible always.
Yeah.
It's something that's always there for one to do. Like usually when you have those experiences and you come out, first thing we do is we try and create things that will help us remember the experience.
Yeah.
Like we will draw an eye, or we'll get a tattoo of eyes or something, or we'll do something like that when you see it, it re-triggers that memory of the experience to remember that moment. So we'll compose a song, we'll write an entire book, we will do a podcast, we will create movies, we will converse with people, sharing the experience to solidify it in our mind so that we remember it. And the one thing that kept coming to me is, if I can, this is not magic work, but now if you can imbue like talismans with the magic of the moments, those moments are then solidified in the talismans. But now if I can imbue the magic or the moment into breath, then all of a sudden I can now breathe into that moment anytime I want to. Or not anytime, but yes, I have that accessibility then, if I so desire. So now when I do, we breathe all the time, so it's not always going to be there, but the conscious breath, the moment you take that one conscious breath, because when you consciously breathe, it feels like you've never breathed before.
Yeah.
It's a strange sensation.
It is strange, yeah.
It's like, how is it that we could do something all the time, and then the moments, like if you say breathe and that person now breathes, it'll feel like, why does it feel like only now am I breathing?
And Obi Marcus talks about it quite often, and in his book he wrote about it. And there was a study they did in Japan where it was, all it takes is 6 conscious deep breaths to literally lower your blood pressure, reduce your stress, anxiety, all the rest. So if you can just take a step back and take 6 conscious breaths, you can shift your physiology, and it's so powerful.
No, it's amazing. Like I read a book called the 2 second meditation, the Warrior's Meditation. It's Andrew L. Haidt, I believe. It's in my book. He coined the term 2 second meditation, where it was within literally one deep breath, you can get into the warrior's mindset or the awareness mind state. And this is now where you hone in all your senses, which is what I try to put through in the book as well. Feeling, hearing, sensing, tasting, seeing, kind of merging all of that into the moment. And then with that one breath, you merge all of those senses into that singular breath. And into that singular breath, that's when you return. And so a 2-second meditation. But it's one thing just to breathe and say, okay, I got it. It's another to have the full understanding backing that singular moment, which will then grant that experience a much deeper connection, a much deeper experience. It's like if you've never climbed any mountains before, and all of a sudden you climb Mount Everest, for instance, it will be jaw-dropping. It's like, oh my God, it's the moment. But then every mountain you practically climb thereafter, it's just like, okay. But now if you climb all these other mountains, you have all these experiences, and now you know the value of what climbing Mount Everest will be. When you get to the top of Mount Everest, you'll have just so much more appreciation, like, oh my God. Just you got this backing behind it, this history of the moment. So when you do that singular deep breath, don't just breathe, but when you breathe, bring in everything. Breathe all of this. Breathe as if you're sucking in the entire universe.
Yeah.
Just close your eyes and do it.
Yeah.
Because if your eyes are open, you're seeing the world out there.
Yeah.
And then the external realities out there. But if you close your eyes, all of a sudden everything becomes the internal experience. So then with the eyes closed, you yourself realize that is the universe, like looking up into the stars. So when you take a deep breath in, now you're really breathing in everything.
Yeah.
And then in that moment, you've returned, you feel, and hold your breath.
Yeah. And it's that slight remembering in that moment. It's like you say, it's like an apple doesn't come from the tree, it comes out of the tree.
Exactly.
It's like we don't come from the candy store, we are there.
Exactly.
So it's like, just take a breath and realize that you are this, you are everything in and it's
So
that's
that's how it is. So when you breathe that in, you're breathing in everything, the entangled breath. So as you breathe out, I breathe you in. The trees breathe out, we breathe in the trees, we breathe out, the trees breathe us in. So we're breathing the same air our ancestors breathed. We breathe the same air that's on the moon and in the sun and like all around. So when you take that deep breath, breathe in all of that. Breathe in all of self, and then breathe it not just into the chest or up to here, but breathe it down into your feet. I mean, if you're standing on earth, breathe it to the center of the earth. Like you bring your thoughts down there.
And that's why practices things like, I mean, even like yoga, which is, people actually realize that the whole practice is in the breath.
Yes.
It's like people are missing the point, trying to focus on all the other things. It's like, just get your breath right, and that is the whole practice. That is why yoga can be so magical.
Open up the whole body. It's like you do all of the yoga just so that when you do Shavasana, when you lie down, you can fully relax. The whole point of the yoga is to get to Shavasana. Yeah. And it's like, it's brilliant. It's like, but then again, the point of yoga is not to get to the end, but the point of the yoga is the flow itself. Yeah. Exactly. And yet we lead it up so that we can open ourselves, so that we can breathe into Shavasana and actually just be.
And all these practices are beautiful in helping us, because we obviously can't have these peak experiences all the time, but they are beautiful ways of connecting the dots in our day-to-day life. And yeah, man, thank you, brother. This has been amazing. I'm going to start ending off, but I wanted to, before we end off, just like, I know you probably mentioned the breathwork meditation. What other things in your day-to-day life do you find kind of helps cultivate that magic that you've written about in the book?
Music. Okay. Listening to music. I mean, that's just, for me, it's the voice of God. It's the voice of the universe. I mean, listening to different types of music. I love my rock and my metal music, but then I also listen to my meditational flow, my piano music, a variety of them. I often also observe. It's a big thing for me. When I'm driving, when I'm reading, I'll have these moments where I lapse back into my 7-gram mushroom trip. Whereby I'm reading a book, like right now. So it's when you're observing the external world, all of a sudden you just have that realization. It's not real, and yet it is. It's all you. It's the daily practice. It's the consistency. I mean, if you realize this and you have that self-awakening, self-realization, and then you kind of just continue in your day-to-day life, and you go back to the 9-to-5 job that you don't like. You continuously keep drinking yourself until you're on the floor, or you eat all the food that makes you feel sick all the time. You kind of lose that track and you wonder why. But if you every day just a little bit, just have a couple conscious breaths a day, if you could do that continuously or keep that mind into a meditative state, then all of a sudden it's kind of like on command. It's very strange.
It is. I also you kind of mentioned it earlier, but it's like, what is, for me, I realized once you have these life-changing experiences, it's like, well, what now? What do I do with myself day to day?
Exactly.
But it's not a case of figuring out that. It's figuring out, okay, what doesn't work in your life? Like,
Exactly.
what wasn't
it's
serving
letting
you?
go of what no longer serves.
Let go of that shit, and then it's
Letting
like
go.
more magic starts.
Exactly. And the minute you can release, this is the most powerful thing I realized writing the book or creating, is you have, so even all the thoughts in your head, if you don't channel that somehow, whether it be however, the podcast, the music, the writing, if you don't put down, every morning you wake up, you are going to identify with those thoughts. You're going to wake up and the first thing you do is, who am I? Okay, this is me, this is what I got to do, all the things. Joe Dispenza goes into deep with all of this as well. But that's solidified in my head. So if I can, like all the thoughts that I create myself, I am Jeffrey, I am this, I've got these ideas and understandings of the universe, my music is going to be this or that. And every morning I do the same thing. But now if I can release that, if I can put it out into the universe, manifest it into this creation, if I can write the words down on paper, I've released those thoughts. I no longer have to wake up every morning pondering those thoughts. And all of a sudden now I have space to absorb new stuff. So if you don't release yourself, you'll forever loop yourself in yourself. I mean, it's a crazy concept. Like I don't compose, once I've got 10 new compositions in piano, I don't compose new songs, not until I've recorded that album. Because if I start composing new songs, I will start slowly forget them. I record my albums so that I can have then the freedom to compose new songs. So the albums are just a byproduct of my passion of playing. The books are just a byproduct of my love of expressing. And I'm always looking for new ways, and I mean that's what everyone.
I think that's probably gonna be the biggest takeaway I take away from this conversation. Thank you, because
Thank you.
that is, I mean, just listening to that, I can feel the truth in that. It's like sometimes you just all up in your head, when you put it out somehow, it's like you got space again for new to come, and then you can continuously grow and change. But if you get stuck in this rut of looping, it's exactly what we do. We loop.
Yeah. We loop all the time.
Oh man, that's good to hear. Brother, where can people find you? I'll put the links into the description of all your stuff. But albums, books, where can they
on
find it?
Spotify, iTunes, Apple. My music's all over. So it's Jeffrey Munks. Piano, just Jeffrey Munks. And then the books are up on Amazon at the moment. The Fractal Spirit, and then the Fractal Path, which is the first book. And I'm excited. I'm excited for the next creations.
Yeah, I
got the next book in mind. I got the next album in mind. I want to do an audiobook as well.
Yes.
And then I'm in the process of thinking about doing an animation film.
Amazing. Well, keep creating, because that gives me an excuse to bring you back on the podcast and we can continue these conversations. So
I'm excited. Thank you for having me. I really I love this. Thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure. I get to enjoy this kind of magic and I thrive in it. So thank you
Likewise.
for adding to this journey of the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, brother. Thank you. Yeah, that's a wrap.